Let's play a shitty game. Now, I'm part of the minority in the video game community. I do not play a lot of shooter games. I've played a few old school shooters like Dread vs. Death and the Dark Forces series. I'll play Team Fortress 2 every now and then, but only against bots because online players piss me off.
It's a condition called being a cynical asshole.
And I recently bought Alien vs. Predator Classic 2000 on Steam, and that game is freaking awesome. But I don't play hardly any modern shooters. And of course, by modern shooter, I mean shooters that rip off Call of Duty, Halo, and Gears of War, because ever since Modern Warfare and Halo came out with online multiplayer and made mountains of money, every single shooter since then has tried to copy them, with exceptions like Far Cry 3 and Resistance 3 being few and far between. Not helping my opinion of modern shooters is that my first foray into the modern shooter genre was Quantum of Solace, and Quantum of Solace is a massive piece of crap. Despite the title, this game is actually based on two movies, Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace, the first two Daniel Craig James Bond movies, and the first two parts of a trilogy that is probably never going to end. It's been a long time since I've seen either movie, so I'm going to recap the story as best I can from a video game. Bond kills a bomb maker who is somehow connected to a guy who's somehow connected to a terrorist financier called Lashif. Lashif owes a bunch of terrorists money, and he decides to get the money back by hosting a big poker game, and I think we're zeroing in on why this guy is in massive debt. And rather than move in on Lashif and take him down, MI6 decides to have Bond enter and win the tournament, and then take him down. So Bond wins the money, but the money gets stolen by some guy called Mr. White, and Casino Royale ends and the game begins with Bond tracking Mr. White to his mansion. So here's where the game starts. Like all other modern-day shooters that strive to be realistic, you've got a minuscule amount of health, but your wounds heal faster than Wolverine. You know, like real soldiers. Because you have so little health, you're expected to shoot from behind cover. When you're behind cover, you can lock onto enemies and shoot them without having to exit cover. I honestly get the feeling that the game's developers couldn't decide if they wanted to make a rip-off of Call of Duty or a rip-off of Gears of War, so they just made both of them. Because the game is designed like a series of shooting galleries with enemies popping in and out of cover while you do the same, and yet the game is mostly played from a first-person perspective. So the game is built around cover-based shooting, but there's a giant pulsating problem with the cover system. If you're behind cover, the only way that you can hit enemies is by locking onto them, and if you're locked onto an enemy, about 90% of your bullets will miss. You lock onto an enemy and start shooting at them, you can expend an entire magazine and still not kill one bad guy. For some inexplicable reason, I am shooting directly at this guy and I'm not hitting him. And what's sad is the game makes a point of saying that your aim is much more accurate if you shoot from behind cover. I just can't get too into a game where whether I hit an enemy or not depends on if the game is in a good mood and feels like registering my bullets hitting him. Your standard weapon is a P99 pistol, not Bond's signature Walther PPK for some reason, but you can carry two extra weapons in addition to your P99, which is fortunate because in every single level the enemies only drop two kinds of guns. Outside of the first few missions, it is only possible to find two different guns in each level, a machine gun and either a rare sniper rifle or a second machine gun. And all of the machine guns in the game are exactly the same. 30-round magazine, almost all of them have single fire, burst fire, and full auto settings. They all deal the same amount of damage and they all take the same amount of time to reload. Some guns recoil slightly more when fired and some fire slightly faster than others. But for the most part, every single gun in the game is identical to the last one. Every now and then you'll find a shitty handgun with an 8-round magazine, and there are two levels where you get a BFG that's effectively useless. Outside of that, it's nothing but a few sniper rifles and endless, identical machine guns. And because all of the enemies in any given level carry the same guns, you'll never worry about running low on ammo, because every enemy is guaranteed to drop ammunition for a gun that you have. Also, your P99 seems to mysteriously replenish ammo all by itself if you use a different gun for a few minutes. I have no idea why. So after you catch Mr. White, who runs to his chopper surprisingly well for having been shot in the leg, you shoot down his helicopter with a few shots from your handgun, which I'm pretty sure is not possible. After that, you see the sorriest excuse for a cutscene that I ever set eyes on. Yeah, this is the framing device of the game's story. Some guy who's working for Quantum hacks into MI6's computer mainframe and watches the events of the movies. We don't see Bond or other characters actually do stuff in these cutscenes. We just see pictures of characters doing stuff. Hell, we don't even see pictures of the characters doing stuff. We see dots on a map with names next to them, and we're told that the characters are doing stuff. This is as cheap in terms of storytelling as games can get. The cutscenes in Iron Man 2 were done better than this. Hell, there are at least 2 points in the game where the anonymous guy watching the recordings literally fast forwards to the next interesting part of the story. I'm not kidding about that. It's like when I watch Star Wars Episode 2 and I keep going, nah, this part's boring, let's go to the next part that has Ewan McGregor in it. Anyway, it turns out that Mr. White is working for some organization called Quantum, but he escapes, and then, for some reason, I'm not sure why, Bond starts going after a general who is trying to take over Bolivia and some guy called Nathaniel Green, who is also working with Quantum. Why Quantum is helping the general is never adequately explained. I typically have difficulty following the stories of James Bond movies to begin with. Mostly all I know when I watch a Bond film is, this is bad guy, this is also bad guy, and this is girl that Bond is trying to shag. So the fact that this game takes the plots of 2 Bond films, abridges them both, and then swirls them together doesn't do this game any favors in terms of being coherent. What screws up the story of the game even more is the way the story is structured. The game has 15 levels. The first 4 are from Quantum of Solace, the second movie. Then Bond has a really long flashback, and the next 10 levels are taken from Casino Royale, the first movie. And then Bond's flashback ends, and the last level is the finale of Quantum of Solace. I understand that they arranged the levels this way so that you can play through the climaxes of both films one after the other, but that doesn't change the fact that this game is basically structured with the middle of the story at the start and the start of the story at the middle. You spend 4 levels going after Green, then you spend 10 levels on a completely different story, and when the flashback finally ends, you've completely forgotten who Green is and why you're trying to kill him. Each level in the game pretty much works the same way. You run through a stage until you come across a few chest-high walls, a group of enemies runs into the room and takes cover behind more chest-high walls, and you systematically shoot the enemies while they pop in and out of cover like a shooting gallery. The enemy AI never does anything else except for pop in and pop out of cover, and occasionally run to an adjacent piece of cover to pop in and pop out of. The game has 4 difficulty settings, but the AI always does the exact same thing. The only thing that bumping up the difficulty does is give you even less health. Every now and then an enemy suicide charges you, but those guys immediately die because the guy that's charging you is the one thing that the lock-on mode can reliably hit. The game's shooting is just monotonous. The game is specifically designed for you to shoot from behind cover using the game's lock-on mode. You take cover, you lock onto an enemy, you wait for him to pop out of cover so you can shoot him, and you move on to the next guy. It's literally shooting while the computer aims for you. But even if you're locked onto an enemy and shooting at him while he's out of cover, the vast majority of your bullets still miss. Hell, you can lock onto gas cans and other exploding objects that are stationary and shoot them, and it still takes several shots to hit those objects. The game's lock-on mode is unable to consistently hit motionless targets. If, on the other hand, you get out of cover and aim the damn gun yourself, you can down an entire room without having to reload. If you're out of cover and you aim with the iron sights, your gun is perfectly accurate and you don't have the bullcrap problems of your bullets mysteriously not hitting the guy you're aiming directly at. Heck, if you've got a sniper rifle, you can even shoot guys while they're in cover, which pretty much breaks the game because you can clear out rooms in a couple of seconds. I almost think the game screws with your accuracy on purpose just to tie one arm behind your back and artificially increase the game's difficulty. Every time that you die, the game flashes a little hint for you, and about 90% of the hints remind you to use cover every chance that you get, because you recover health faster in cover and your gun is allegedly more accurate if you fire from cover. The game is designed for you to shoot at pop-up targets from cover, but your gun is dramatically more accurate and the game is much easier if you shoot from out of cover. So yeah, bad design. Oh, and the other 10% of the hints tell you that people can't hear you shoot if you put the silencer on your gun. Whoa. Mind blown. All this time I thought the silencer made my gun shoot M&Ms. You're telling me the silencer actually makes my gun silent? Speaking of silencers, one of the game's helpful little hints tells you that many of the game's guns can be equipped with silencers. Yeah, change that statement to one gun that you find in one level can be equipped with a silencer outside of your P99. Every now and then the game forces you to play through a little stealth section where you either sneak around cameras or sneak around enemy patrols without getting spotted. To get past cameras, you have to sneak around a room until you find and shut off a fuse box. If you shoot the camera, you immediately set off an alarm. So how come shutting off the camera doesn't set off an alarm, but shooting it does? Either way, the camera goes dead. What's the damn difference? But I really hate when you have to sneak around enemy patrols because most of the enemies that you have to sneak around are out of sight, a lot of the enemies are impossible to see coming, and frankly it seems like an alarm usually sounds the nanosecond that you kill an enemy or move out of cover anyway. I feel like the game has one very specific idea of what you're supposed to do, and the game punishes you if you don't do exactly, down to the last minor detail, what the game expects you to do. And I keep screwing up the stealth sections and having to fight elite guards because I can't figure out the stringent go here and shoot this guy at this exact precise second plan that the game has laid out for me. And yeah, maybe that's realistic for being a secret agent and you get detected for making one minuscule mistake, but it's not fun that the game punishes you for not being psychic. Hell, I actually don't mind getting stormed by elite guards because elite guards tend to carry better weapons. Marginally better weapons because all of the guns are the same in this stupid game, and since shooting from out of cover basically breaks the game's combat system, the elite guards usually are just a nuisance that drops tons of ammo. There are a few special levels in the game that really get on my nerves. The game has 15 levels. In 2 of them, you do not get a gun. In one of the levels, you just run through the stage with no time limit and basically no way to die. And in one of the levels, you have to run to Bond's car with blurry vision and cruddy controls because you've been poisoned. At the end of the level, you have to cross a street and avoid getting hit by cars. And if you don't cross the road in the exact right spot, you spontaneously drop dead once you reach the end of the street, whether a car actually hit you or not. If you don't cross the road at the exact right spot, then apparently God himself just strikes you down because he feels like it. Do you see what I mean about the game slapping you across the face for not doing exactly what the game wants you to do? I also hate the level at the docks where you have to use a sniper rifle to protect Bond's useless-ass girlfriend, while ordinary guys without sniper rifles somehow shoot at you with pixel-perfect aim from completely across the dock, and you only have a few seconds to kill each bad guy in exact order before she gets thrown overboard and you have to start the frickin' section over again. And these henchmen have to be dumb as rocks because they're throwing overboard a hostage that it's been made abundantly clear they're supposed to be taking alive! Oops! But the level that pisses me off most in this game is the Shantytown level. At the end of this level, Bond and worthless unnamed support character hold up in a 2-level house and you have to fight off a swarm of enemies that attack you from 3 different directions. And you have extremely little health and die if you take just a few bullets. Does anybody want to apply some deductive reasoning to this situation? Because enemies come at you from 3 different directions at once, as soon as you pop out to shoot one guy, you immediately get shot from off-screen and die. It doesn't help that the level is so poorly designed that you can't see enemies around the scenery until... crap! You can't even see enemies until after they've started shooting you. Damn it! The only way to beat this level... The only way to beat this level is to die about 8 times and gradually memorize where all of the enemies come from. Realistic? Yes. But fun? Put your lips to my ass and French kiss it, you pile of fuck! And before you reach to type me a message saying, of course the game sucks, you're playing it on the Wii because someone always does, I should point out that Quantum of Solace is exactly the same on all 3 consoles. This shitty game is just as shitty on the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. The only thing that's different between the versions is the game's multiplayer and the game's graphics. At least I hope the graphics are different across the 3 consoles because the Wii version is ugly as hell. The people look like they're made of clay and they have these weird fish mouths. If you get close enough to an enemy, you see a giant dumb grin on the enemy's face, and all of the surfaces in all of the environments are smooth and mostly devoid of textures. Plus, I don't think the game's developers understand what lighting and shading are. Also, the game's artists couldn't be bothered to add animations for explosions. Look at what happens when I shoot this can of flammable liquid. No explosion. Granted, physics says that it shouldn't explode in the first place, but a little poof of flame glows up and no explosion appears. Same thing happens with grenades, which have the blast radius and destructive yield of a firecracker. If an enemy throws a grenade at you, which is helpfully indicated by a bright red light, a loud beeping noise, and one of the bad guys shouting, "I just threw a grenade" at the top of his lungs, all you have to do is take 2 steps to the right and you survive. Again, realism! And the fact that the grenades suck monkey blood in this game is an extremely large design flaw when you get to the end of the game. The game ends with a boss fight against Green. He hides behind a piece of cover 1 floor above you and chucks grenades at you, and 2 snipers spawn into either side of him, and no matter how many times you kill the snipers, they never stop coming. You can kill an entire continent's worth of soldiers and the snipers just keep spawning. You win this boss fight by damaging Green until he switches to a different piece of cover. You then shoot a fire extinguisher behind Green at this second position, which causes Green to get out of cover, and finally you can shoot him in the head and kill him. It's been a while since I've seen the movie, but I seem to remember Bond wanting to take Green alive so that he could interrogate him about Quantum, you know, like a real spy would. But here's the problem. The only way to damage Green and force him to move is to throw grenades at him, and grenades in this game do 0 blast damage. If you throw a grenade and it does anything other than land in Green's lap, it doesn't hurt him. Oh, and what happens if you run out of grenades, you ask? Well, it just so happens that Bond has taken cover right next to an ammo box that will restock your grenades as many times as you want. Luckily, Green just happened to stockpile enough grenades and sniper rifle magazines to blow up Rhode Island in this room. You know, if this game gives you a minuscule amount of health in the name of being realistic, then why does a grenade blowing up in Green's lap just mildly irritate him when it should turn him into a few gallons of chunky salsa? And how come, even though I've got a sniper rifle and a clear headshot when he's in cover, 60 sniper bullets to the face doesn't kill the bitch? Realism, my ass! I haven't beaten this game on its hard mode, and I'll tell you why. I got up to the final boss fight on Agent difficulty, and I swear on the ghost of Shocky this is true. I spent 45 minutes chucking grenades at that asshole, and it still didn't work. He still didn't move. And the only reason why I stopped at 45 minutes is because I got killed by a sniper and had to start the fight over. See, throwing a grenade requires you to get out of cover, and if you don't very carefully kill all 4 snipers and throw a grenade before any respawn, you'll get shot and killed because you've got so little health. If you make one tiny mistake, you get shot while you're trying to throw the grenade, and then the grenade misses anyway. So I rage quit, and I never looked back. The game is just not worth it. When I get to the end of the game, I should think to myself, I can't wait to play this game again, or that was fun, I'm glad I invested my time and money into this game. At the end of Quantum of Solace, I was thinking to myself, thank merciful God that's over. Doesn't matter what difficulty you play anyway, you still get a terrible ending. At the end of the game, you find out that Mr. White was the guy watching the stuff on MI6's mainframe this whole time. Wow, that means absolutely nothing because we don't know anything about who Mr. White is or why he's relevant aside from this is bad guy. And then we see Bond spying on him from outside his window. And then credits. The game just ends on to be continued, and it's never going to be continued because the next Bond movie that came out was Skyfall, and Skyfall has nothing to do with either of the movies in this game. You know what? Maybe that's for the best. I don't think people care anymore. I'm not saying that all modern military shooters are bad. I played the 2010 remake of GoldenEye and I liked it, just not as much as I like Dread vs. Death. But Quantum of Solace is a microcosm of the mistakes that modern shooters keep making. Lousy story, lousy monotonous shooting against dumb enemies, shooting gallery-like design, no variation in weapons, all because it doesn't matter how bad the single-player mode is, all people want is multiplayer. Maybe multiplayer is the way of the future and I'm just stuck in the past and resisting the change, but if Metroid Prime Hunters, hackers, Mario Kart snakers, and the shitheads on Team Fortress 2 are any indication, the past is a place worth living in. Because good multiplayer lasts until the shitheads take over, but good single player lasts forever.